The beauty of the Nikki Haley for President campaign is that it's a national Rorschach blot. If you have any interest at all in the condition of the United States or its future, obviously you are passionately, by definition, opposed to Nikki Haley becoming president because she has no interest in the United States or its future. But if you are completely bought in to the class of people who currently run the country and who are running it into the ground, then you're all in on Nikki Haley because she's, in effect, your puppet. So it's really interesting to see people's reaction to this campaign. And most telling of all, pretty much every permanent fixture in Washington is either supportive of Nikki Haley or isn't saying anything about it. And that brings us to our next guest. He is Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. And as he assessed the presidential race, his reaction was the following. This is a paraphrase, but it's basically what he said. He said, I'm not exactly sure who I'm for. I know very well who I'm against. I'm against Nikki Haley. So against Nikki Haley that, on principle, not personal, that he announced a new movement called Never Nikki. Here it is.
So I'm announcing this morning that I'm Never Nikki. And if you go to nevernikki.net, you can let her know that you're not a supporter either. I don't think any informed or knowledgeable libertarian or conservative should support Nikki Haley. I've seen her attitude towards our interventions overseas. I've seen her involvement in the military-industrial complex, $8 million being paid to become part of the team. But I've also seen her indicate that she thinks you should be registered to use the internet, that people posting ideas anonymously. I think she fails to understand that our republic was founded upon people like Ben Franklin, Sam Adams, Madison, John Jay, and others who posted routinely. For fear of the government, they posted routinely anonymously. So I'm announcing today I'm Never Nikki. You can go to nevernikki.net and sign up and show her that you're Never Nikki also.
So it's one thing to find Nikki Haley distasteful, to acknowledge that she's a bloodthirsty feminist harpy who should be nowhere near power. Most reasonable people have reached that conclusion. But to start a website, Never Nikki, suggests a level of anti-Nikki commitment that's interesting and worth talking about. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky joins us now. Senator, thanks so much for coming on. So let's start at the end. What moved you? I don't think you're being paid to do this. You're not getting extra points. You're already a U.S. Senator. Why were you so inflamed by her campaign that you built this website?
Well, nobody ever accused me of going halfway into anything.
Fair.
And it gets to me at a very basic level. It gets to me when I see people who I think care more about the borders of Ukraine than they care about our own southern border. And I see these people every day because they're the entire Democrat caucus up here, but they're half of my caucus. Half of my Republican caucus is, as we speak, ready to sell out, and they're ready to sell out fake border reform in exchange for what they really want, which is to send more of your tax dollars to Ukraine. I think Nikki Haley fits right in that camp. I think she's from the McConnell, Dick Cheney wing of the party, and this is the antithesis of everything I believe in. I've spent a few years trying to promote the ideas of liberty. There is a wing of the party that believes in that, and I want to make sure anybody that follows what I do knows that there's no way, shape, or form I could support Nikki Haley.
So obviously you're not increasing your contributions from the defense industry by attacking Nikki Haley. So I'm just guessing Raytheon's not paying you to do this. They're on her side. So it's purely a passion project for you.
Yeah, and I think there are some things out there, and I've heard this both from people like Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, as well as from McConnell's and others. Their argument, and it's similar to Nikki Haley's argument, is that war is good for our armaments industries. These are U.S. corporations, and this makes U.S. powerful to have these corporations have larger profits. And so really, they extol war with no concern, really. And I know it's not American soldiers, but people are dying over there. And by many estimates, well over 100,000 people have died. But to justify that, to say it makes our armaments industry stronger, and the fact that Nikki Haley worked in that armaments industry, I find it a despicable argument, an inhumane, sort of unreal argument that people would argue that corporate profits for arms merchants is something that we should justify war over. And it just gets to me. I just think it's a reprehensible argument. I told Anthony Blinken that. I've told others that this is something that, it's one thing to say, I told him, I don't think it was Blinken, it was one of his underlings the last time in a committee. I said, try to go back to the liberation argument. At least talk about someone's freedom instead of talking about the profits that this will bring to U.S. arms merchants. They got mad at me, but, somebody's got to say it.
Well, I mean, as an American, a patriotic American, you want to believe that your country's a force for good. But the argument you just described is so disgusting and so completely immoral that it's hard to believe your country is if it's being led by people who want to kill others for the sake of enriching the people who make weapons of mass destruction. What did they say when you raised that? Were they ashamed?
They're taken aback that someone dares to challenge them, but they will retreat into some sort of liberation argument of this is best for freedom. But I guess when I look at the situation over there, I think I think it makes our national security more vulnerable the more we go into debt, and I think debt's the number one threat. And
Yes.
Another $60 billion is a significant amount of money. We've already sent $100 billion over there. I don't think there's sufficient oversight in it, but I also think the longer we send money, the less likely there is to be a negotiated settlement. So it will mean thousands of more lives lost. It's not that I'm insensitive to the war. I actually am very sensitive to people dying on both sides. I'm not sympathetic to Russia. Russia invaded. They're the aggressor. My sympathies are with Ukraine. But at the same time, I think Russia occupies a portion that they're not giving up, and Ukraine does not have the ability to remove them from eastern Ukraine. The commander-in-chief of the Ukraine army said recently it's a stalemate. Zelensky's everywhere around the world. He's got time to be in Vogue magazine, him and his wife. He also has time to jet off to Argentina. And look, I'm fascinated by the new president of Argentina. I'd like to go too. But if I were in the middle of a war, I would think it might not be the best time to go to a post-election party all the way halfway across the world. But Zelensky, I really think that there are other problems here too. If people talk about whether or not our aid should be conditioned, well, you'd think they talk so much about democracy, maybe it ought to be conditioned on that the country receiving the aid ought to have elections. There are no presidential elections. They've been canceled. There are no scheduled elections in Ukraine. There also are accusations of oligarchs or wealthy people that have taken over state industries that are profiting directly by this. Some of our money's going to I think 60 Minutes showed like a women's bags, clothing and bag store getting grants from us, like small business loans to Ukraine. We're paying for their government workers. We're paying for their pensions, for goodness sakes. But this is something that Nikki Haley is all in on, and clearly the rest of the pack has separated themselves from her on this. And so it's a real division in the party. It's not it's not brand new. It's not Nikki Haley being brand new, but she's clearly in the McCain, Dick Cheney, McConnell camp. These are the big government Republicans. These are the people who never met a war they didn't love to be involved with, and they somehow think they're going to make the world or remake the world in our image, and they fail to, I think, acknowledge failure after failure after failure. And but I don't want a president, Republican or Democrat, from that wing of the party.
So you noted that there are no scheduled presidential elections in Ukraine. There are scheduled presidential elections in Russia. Sorry, that's just a fact. We know that Ukraine has banned a Christian denomination. Russia has not. Okay. So at that point, you sort of wonder, like, all this liberation talk that we heard at the beginning, we're on the side of democracy against dictatorship. We're on the side of the country that banned a Christian denomination and canceled elections. Clearly, we're not on the side of democracy, obviously. So was it always about the money, do you think? Like, what is this exactly? What was the motive that drove our leaders to destroy, the global economy?
The thing, it's somewhat perplexing.